Hi all. I wanted to give a quick run through of problem set 1 and show you some of the, um, the tasks and how I might go about solving them. Now, as you probably noticed, a lot of the tasks are a little open-ended. And I did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, that there's never an exact reason or exact way to do something in Excel. Oftentimes there's a few different ways to go about it, and that is true for statistics as well. And so um, one of the things that I hope we learn along the way is that there are multiple ways to do it, and that we have to be thoughtful, or there's decisions to be made along the way. So, and especially in something like Excel. So how do you want to visualize the data, or how do you want to present the data? This brings with it some choices along the way. And number two, I think it's good if you have to, kind of struggle or fight through some of those uncertainties as well. So we'll walk through this, and again, what this means is that the way I go about it is not the only way, and for some of these we'll look at some of the options out there. So the first thing and we'll just kind of walk through these in order and talk about some of the issues they bring up. So the first thing I ask you to do is to rename the sheet. So down in the lower left here, we can add more sheets, and oftentimes a data file will have multiple sheets, and you'll have different things working on each of them. So it's important to kind of be able to quickly remind yourself what sheet we're on. So we may want to rename this. This is that maybe we'll do customer charges, because we may remember, oh yeah, this is where we have the annual charges, and somewhere else we might have mailing addresses or something. We can add other data in there, and I'm gonna make a copy of this. So I've selected all of the data in this sheet here by I could select certain columns by dragging across the top, or certain rows. But if I want to select all the data up here in this top left, if I click there, it should highlight the whole data or the whole sheet. And I'm going to do Control C to copy, and I'm going to go ahead and make a copy over here. And you can see it actually brought with the text file as well, or the text box. Just because I'll want to reference kind of a couple different ways we can do things. So I'll rename this as customer charges copy. Okay, and another thing you might, I'm going to go ahead and change the tab color here, just to remind myself or help my mind recognize that these are related to each other. And so they're both in red. So somewhere down the road, again, if I have other sheets in here, I might code them in a different color, just so when I'm thinking about where I want to go, I know that these are a copy. Okay, so the next thing I ask you to do is to sort the data by one of the variables. And so sometimes the observations, so each one of these is a different observation, right? So we have account number, and we have all of this information about this account number. Sometimes the account number might carry with it certain information, and it might make sense to sort by the account number. And I don't know if this is true in this made up version, although maybe the shorter numbers are earlier customers or something like that. But perhaps it makes more sense to sort by, say, annual charges. Maybe you're more focused in on, the ones that are making you more money. So we can we can click here. We'll go up to the data tab and go ahead and sort. Okay, and Excel is going to try to help us along the way here, because this data is linked, we don't want to just sort the annual charges, and it's going to yell at me here, which is good. And I do want to expand the selection, again, because if I only sort here and I leave the rest, if I leave columns A through H unsorted, then I've lost the connection. I no longer have that account 233 is linked to this charges. So I do want to expand the selection, and now that's the selection. I'm going to go ahead and sort by annual charges, and we can do smallest to largest. Let's do largest to smallest so that we can focus in on those people that maybe have the big bills. And that might be a more helpful way to organize the data set instead of however it came in. Okay, and we'll see in a bit how that can be done other ways if you're in a table. So task C, I ask you to make this table more legible. And so we can do that through some of the formatting tools on Excel. So then the first thing that is probably most frustrating is that it's hard to read what all these variables are because they're too clumped in there. So we may want to just drag out these, and I'm just clicking down, left clicking and dragging them out. And already you can see we can more easily read what's going on here. We can, so now I have some empty white space up here. To get rid of that, all I'm going to do is double click in between columns 1 and 2 here, and that's going to shorten up 1 as much as it can without losing any of the information. Okay, so all of that white space is gone. We can do that in columns as well. So something like age, this should shorten up, kind of suck it in there, and that might be a little too tight for visually. So you can always play around with it. Other things you may want to, so this is, all the variable names are already bolded, which is often a helpful thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bottom border to this. Just give it a little line, and so on. Yeah, so you could keep messing around with different shadings. Alternatively, we can have Excel formatted as a table by itself, or kind of do it automatically. So still in the Home tab, there's a Format as Table, and as long as you're clicked somewhere in here, you can choose from any of these kind of pre-built tables, and it'll usually do pretty well at picking up that's the area that you want to grab. I'm going to do that, and it's going to make all these changes for me. And so sometimes, especially if you're working in the data set a lot, it's nice to have it kind of alternating shades. A lot of times we don't actually sit and look through all of the data. We more pull from it, and as we'll see in the next few chapters, we're not actually in there reading each data point. So I'm going to actually undo that, and I'm going to go over to my copy and do that over here. So I'm going to Format as Table, and yeah, so now we can kind of do things both. And so because of that, I'm going to go ahead and rename this. I'll just make it CC Table. Okay. Now this might be more stretched out than you would want. It might be nice to kind of shorten this up just so we have some space still on the screen. The other thing is we could always think about renaming these variables. Okay, hours per week watching television, TV watching per week. Maybe I didn't really shorten this up too much because I do want to put hours in here. Something like that. So it sometimes is helpful to think through the variable names. That can help you out. So that's a quick way. I mentioned sorting and some other tools that you have in the table. So because this is now a table, Excel is going to treat it differently than it does just the normal data. So I can actually sort directly from the table here. So if you click on these little arrows up in the top row, so this top row is the variable names, but it's also the names of the columns in the table. And so I can sort just directly from here if I want to know the smallest household size. And notice it didn't have to yell at me about what part of the table it's going to sort. It's going to sort the whole thing. We can also focus in on certain aspects. So if I go to the gender and I'm going to unselect the male. Okay, so all we're going to have is female. And so when I click OK, now we just have the, whatever this is, 15 or so account numbers that are under female. And we can undo that. So the data's not gone. And this is an important thing. You never want to actually remove the data unless you're completely certain you never need it again. Okay, so Excel, different than some other statistical programs, you can quickly delete and mess up your data. So you want to be careful about that. But what we've actually done here is hide the data. So if you look, I'm going to jump back and forth here. So if we look right now, we do have account numbers here, but we also know what cell we're in. So A2. So we have the different rows here along the left-hand side, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. When I go in here and I remove the males, it's no longer 2, 3, 4, 5. We actually go 1, 3, 4, 5, 9. So we've skipped ahead. Okay, so what's actually happened is we've hid some of these rows. And you can actually see, I think that happened to my, yeah, it's kind of happened in my text box too. So you can do this manually actually. You can see I clicked in between these two and I right-clicked and chose unhide. And it brought back one of them. So you can always do that manually, but that's what Excel is doing when you select just a type. And so you can do that with, you know, all kinds of different variables here. If we just do not care about people with 4 years, we can get rid of them, okay, but not permanently. So that's another kind of extra benefit of putting things into a table format, is it can kind of help you sort through the data a little bit easier. Okay. All right. So the next pair of tasks I have you do is create some variables. And so in step D, or task D, I want you to name a new variable. I want you to name it female, and enter a 1 if gender is female and a 0 if gender is male. Okay, so so how do we make a new variable? Well, we just add a new header in the top row. Okay, so I could just type it in here, and Excel kind of figured out that I probably wanted to look somewhat similar. I'm actually going to undo that. I'm going to put it next to this gender one just so we can work a little easier with it. So I've clicked on column H. I'm going to right click and do insert, and that's going to put a new column to the left of that variable. And here I'm going to just make it named female. And now I want it to be a 1 if the gender is female and a 0 if male. So I could simply do 0, 1, that one's 0, this one's 1, and so on, and that would be fine. I'd get the data in there as long as I didn't, you know, mess up the data entry somehow or forget what I was supposed to be doing. And that would work pretty well for our 39 observations. Now, when you have 1,000 observations, this becomes quite cumbersome. So we're going to let Excel do the work for us, and we're going to do that by using a formula. So I'm going to use the if command. Okay, and now Excel's going to tell us what we need here. We need a logical test, and so here we're gonna make an equation. We're gonna do something equals something, okay? And Excel is gonna test if that's true or false. And we're gonna be able to tell Excel, hey, if this equation is true, put in a certain value. If the equation is false, put in a different value. So the equation that we're gonna use, or the logical test, is Excel, I'd like you to check if this cell is equal to the word or the string of characters. So because I'm looking for characters, I'm going to put it in quotations. That might be hard to see, but I'm putting equals, and you can see it better maybe up top. Is G10 equal to female? And then if that equation is true, I want you to put a 1. If that equation is false, I want you to put a 0. So notice Excel's kind of helping us along. It might be hard to see, but it's bolding the part of the formula that I'm on. Okay, so I'm going to end that with a closed parenthesis, and I'm going to hit enter. And sure enough, I get a 1. Because that cell is in fact equal to female, it gives me a 0. It gives me that it's true, and because I said 1 here, it gives me a 1. Now I can put anything in there. Oh, apparently I can't. Oh. Again, with characters, I needed to put it in quotations. So I could make it say anything in here. I could say 2. But I'm going to have it say 1, and we'll talk about why in just a little bit. And so that works. And so now I've put it in as G10, And because I haven't locked that in, I haven't used a $sign to lock that in, what that means is when I drag this down, it's going to update. So in the next row, it's no longer looking for G10, it's looking for G11. And that's over here, and it does in fact say female. Okay, and so I can go ahead and drag that down, and it's going to update that for each and every row. And I'm going to drag that up just to get them all working the same. Now, one word of caution is if I have something misspelled here, it's going to put it as a 0, when in fact that's, well, that's probably supposed to be female. Okay. Yeah, so I just want this as a 0, 1. I don't need this decimal point. So I'm going to right click, or I'm going to select this data, this variable here, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to format the cell. And I'm going to tell Excel that I want it as a number, and I'm just going to take away the decimal points. So now I just see 0, 1. Now, what we've just created is something called a dummy variable. Okay, and dummy variables are pretty common in statistics because they serve they help us do some certain statistical methods. So if you know much about computers, you know that they work largely in 0 and 1s, right? And they do that because you can kind of turn on and off a current based on that, right? So things are either on or off. So we can do the same type of thing with some of our statistical methods. We turn things either on or off based on whether a variable is 1 or 0. So we'll talk about these towards the end of the class, but this will come up, this ability to turn the variable on or off within a most notably in something called regression that we'll get to. And so you'll see these dummy variables pop up in data sets, and especially, well, most notably when we have a variable here that is just 2 things, right? So there's only male and female in our data set with regards to gender, and so it's quite simple to put it into a 0 or a 1. You can do more elaborate dummy variables, and we'll do that down the road. You might want to say, okay, is the household size greater than 3 or less than 3? So you can make dummy variables based on a lot of different cutoff, or like a cutoff there with a numerical variable, but it's pretty straightforward with a qualitative variable if there's just 2 values. So that's our first creation of a dummy variable. The reason I have you name it female is because now, okay, so in the gender variable we can see what the 2 values mean. In the female variable, if we had instead named this gender, we'd have to reference back to some document somewhere to say, okay, what did we want the 0 and the 1 to equal? So when we name it something like female, it's a good reminder that if you always kind of do it the same way, okay, so whatever it's named up here, the 1 is yes and the 0 is no. Okay, so that's creating a variable, and in fact it was a dummy variable. Next, in step E, we want to go ahead and make another variable, this time annual charges, and I'm going to do that over here next to the other annual charges. So why are we doing this? Well, we may want to just present this data in a different unit, right? So we're talking about $1,000 instead of just dollars. Also, notice we have annual income in thousands of dollars, so it might make more sense to play around with both variables in the same units. So that might be one reason. And this again is going to be pretty simple, right? If we just reference the value we have here and we simply divide by 1,000, it's good to spit that out for us. Okay, and we can drag down again because I haven't locked that in. It's going to drag down nicely for us. Okay, and then lastly, again, we might want to format this cell a little bit. That's a lot of specificness, and maybe I want to do 0 decimal points. Actually, maybe I want to bring with the 3 so that I can see the dollars at least. Yeah, so that was creating a new variable. I'm going to jump over to the table and show you that we can do that here as well. So I'm just going to quickly insert. behaves slightly different when we're in a table, but I can rename that female. When I do the same if formula, if logical test, if this, so I'm going to click over here and notice no longer does it say G2. It's telling me the gender. So it's referencing this column in the table. If that is equal to female in the quotes because it's a character string, not a number, then I still want to tell it, okay, if that's true, 1, if it's false, 0. Okay, and then close that. And notice it Excel figured out that I'm adding this whole column as a new variable, and it went ahead and did that for the whole column. Okay, so again, a little quicker, a little simpler if you're in the table format, and the same thing would happen over here. In fact, I can just see if this works. Yes, so I just typed in, I clicked this divided by 1,000, and it added a new column and everything. Okay, and then I would just need to rename this. Something like that. Okay, so again, just have to be aware of how, if you're working in a table or not a table, things are just slightly different. Okay, next I ask you to play around with the charts and just get your hands dirty. And now we haven't covered charts as far as how to select which to do, but along in the Excel training, you at least saw some introduction to that, and as you probably found, it's not quite as straightforward as you maybe hoped, and we'll talk about why that is in the next few chapters. We do have to do a little manipulation of the data or some calculations to get into our classical charts, as far as the pie and the bar charts and whatnot. So if you found this difficult or couldn't find a chart that really helped you present the data, that's okay, and that's kind of I wanted you to just have to kind of struggle with and understand that there's a lot of different charts going on here in Excel. So for instance, if I just want, your default might have been to just grab some data or select some data, or you maybe not even selecting some data, go up here, insert a chart, and see what it shows you, and maybe this is what you see, and so what we're actually getting here is so you can see numbers are ranging 1 to 8 and 6. So what's happening is that value is going along the y-axis, and along the x-axis is actually kind of the order in which. So we see 5, 4, 7, 8. So we see 5, 4, 7, 8. So it's just kind of plotting them out. So it doesn't really make sense as a bar or column chart, and we'll see that we'll have to actually build a frequency table if we want to go that route in Excel. The most useful quick chart. So I'm going to select annual income, and I'm going to select annual charges at the same time. So to do that, I'm going to use Control. I've clicked on annual income. If I want to select multiple columns, I can't just click on them. So if I want to select all of the values in between, so if I want to select B, C, and D, I can hold Shift and click on D, and that's going to grab all of them. If I want just B and D, if I click B, then I'm going to hold down Control and click D. Now I have B and D, and I can actually keep doing that and select the ones I want. I can unselect some as long as I'm still holding Control. Okay, and Shift works similarly. I can back out of that as long as I'm still holding Shift. Okay, so I want annual income and I want annual charges, both in thousands of dollars. Okay, so one quick chart that might give us some insight is if I insert what's called a scatter plot or scatter chart here in Excel. Okay, so we insert up here and we can find the charts here, and because I have the two variables, now I might have something that gives me some insight. Okay, because now I can compare annual charges and annual income. We would want to add in some labels. not, yeah, there. Okay, and we would want to look into what their income is versus, or which one's which. So I'm not going to take the time to double check which is which, but now we can see, so jumping ahead ourselves a chapter or two, we can see there's some type of a relationship here, is where when we're low in one, we tend to be low in the other, and when we're high in one, we tend to be high in the other. Okay, so that might be a reason to put up a scatter plot like that, and in fact, we'll do that quite a bit. Okay, so, but as you can see, there's a whole host of different charts, and again, a lot of them we're going to need to do a little more work. You know, this is not a pie chart that we're familiar with seeing. That doesn't really tell us any information, okay? And so we'll need to do a little calculation in Excel before we just start throwing those up. But now, at least, hopefully you have gotten your hands dirty a little bit. Okay, task G, at the bottom of the data set, add a row labeled mean and calculate the mean or average for the variables for which it works to do so. Okay, so down here, I'm going to add, I'm just going to put it in here. I'm not going to take the mean of the account number. Now, notice when I'm down there working, I can no longer see what variables I'm working in. So one important thing to learn about Excel is freezing panes. And so if I go up to the View tab, there's something called Freeze Panes over here. And I'm going to select, so I've put myself in B2. So I'm going to select Freeze Panes. It could freeze just the top row. Actually, maybe I'll just do that, so we don't actually need the account number. So now, as I scroll down, the top row remains visible. So I can always know, okay, this is household size. All right, so to figure out the mean, again, it's a formula here, and we're going to use, and it is just average. Okay, so we do average, and we open the bracket, and now we just need the numbers. And so we can click and drag these, and we can find out that the mean is 64.4. Before I get ahead of myself, I might want to, again, kind of set this data aside or indicate it that it's different. So I'm just going to put a top order so there's a little line there. Again, that's average. It doesn't matter if you capitalize or not in that. I also can just type them in. So I know that that stretches from C2 to C40, okay? Just because I've been familiar with the data set, I know that that's the range, so I don't actually have to scroll back up and click and drag. I can just type it in. And remember that colon grabs the data in between. Okay, and I can hit enter, and now I know the average household size. Again, average, gotta spell it right though. And we could do C2, comma, C3, comma, C4, etc. Right? We can have some mixture of that, C40. Okay, so you can do it different ways. You could skip a number in there if you wanted. Different ways to do it. And we'll just do it one more time. What is this? E? So if those of you that are paying attention probably know that I just made a little mistake here. These are not supposed to be C's. They're supposed to be D. So I'm working in, yeah. And in fact, Excel kind of already notes that, and it's trying to give me a little flag here that I've done something different. Formula in this cell differs from formulas in this area of the spreadsheet. So it's trying to help me out. In fact, I want that to be D's. And so once we have a formula, we can pull it over and it's going to update. Okay, so again, because I haven't locked anything in with dollar signs, I can pull it over and now it's actually fixed the issue for me. And so we can keep doing that. Noting, of course, that the average of gender and the average of yes or no here don't make a lot of sense. Okay, so those, maybe we would want to just clean that up by deleting them. But now we have the average of all of these other variables. And there is in the, so, well, I guess I want a mean here. Again, we can do that in the table. There is a quick way, and there should be, let's see, somewhere in here there's a way to quickly add table design. A total row. That's not quite what I wanted. Let's go back into that. I thought, yeah, okay. So when I put a total, I clicked the little box for total row, and that gave me a bottom row here, and I can actually select these as average, and so on. Okay, so again, when you're in a table format, there are slightly other ways. Of course, you can always just type in the formula as well. Yeah, so jumping back, G2 here, I wanted you to insert a text box and type inside of it the average age and average annual charges. Okay, so to insert a text box, I think you can do it up here. Yeah, there is text box up here. Alternatively, if you're ever in the data set or just in the format, you can insert. That's not true. We'll just use it up here. There is a shortcut. Okay, and then you can just click and drag. That's going to give you a text box. You can, if you click along the edge, you can change the fill if you want it to show up better and not just be the white background. And within it, you can just type whatever you would like. So occasionally throughout the future problem sets, I'll probably have you type up some answers in text boxes. And so here we would say, average age. Age is, and we can reference that, 43.4. Average annual charges equal to 11,244.5 or 50 cents. Maybe I want to just indicate that's money. Okay. And then the last couple things, apparently I had 2 H's here. I wanted you to add another sheet, which we've already kind of done. And I wanted you to copy over only the household and hours per week watching television. Okay, so again, if we want to just select those, so I have household, I can hold Control and select this next one. Then I'm gonna copy it, Control C. I'm gonna go over to my new sheet and paste it, Control V. Okay, and I think I wanted you to rename this. So you might do household size and TV. Okay, and so that might be helpful if you want to just focus in, if you're going to spend some time, playing around with those 2 variables. Again, you could then insert a scatter plot or insert, some other types of visuals, and we'll cover those more coming up. And then the last part, the last 2 parts, saving the data set. So I'm just gonna go up here, and what I want you to, so if we go into Save As, that's the wrong screen. If we click Save As, we can go ahead and save it. You can browse where you want it exactly to go. But a couple important things is that you want it as either an XLSX, that's fine, or an oftentimes you'll see it as that. You can see it as a you can use an XLS. Is that popping up here anywhere? Here's the XLS. It's kind of the original Excel, so you'll see it as that. You'll see data files as XLS or XLSX, sometimes XLSM. You might also see CSV. So that stands for comma separated variable. Yeah. And that's a way that the data is stored, and a lot of data files are stored as CSVs. It's a fairly compact way to store the data. It's comma delimited file. So yeah, so save it as that, but I wanted you to save it as I don't know, problem set 1 and then an underscore and your name, Steve Perry. And yeah, so then you can click save, and it should be wherever you put it, and then you can upload that to Canvas. And if you're curious or needing help with that, there's a tutorial that walks you through kind of where to click for that. But there should be a submit assignment button there. So that's a long-winded way to walk you through problem set 1, but hopefully there were a few items there that was helpful to refresh as we move forward in Excel.